listening to the start of your NFL week. You're listening to the Opening Whistle Radio Show, right here on MetsonRadio.com. Now, here are your hosts, Albert Albanese and Avi Shipman.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Opening Whistle Radio Show, right here on MESNRadio.com. I'm your host, Albert Albanese, and as you can probably hear, I'm the only person in the studio tonight because Avi has decided to trade the harsh, cold winter of New York and instead just sit on a beach in Miami. So I'm going to be here by myself. So what I'm going to need you guys to do is, if you're out there, please, if you're listening, give us a call and talk about all the stuff that went on over this past week. Our number here in the studio is 609-910-0687. And I guess, I feel like this is usually the place where I throw it to Avi, and there's no Avi to throw it to, so I got to throw it to myself. I guess we're going to kind of just dig right into what we have going on this week. So, first and foremost, last week, we just want to throw out another apology. Avi and I would both like to apologize, and I'll do it for him. Last week, we had something wrong in the studio. We couldn't take your phone calls. We're hoping, really hoping that if that doesn't happen again this time. So, try to give us a call, and hopefully we can hear you this time, because last time that wasn't really fun for anybody. For everybody who did call in, if you are listening again, thank you very much for trying to participate in the show. Unfortunately, these things kind of happen, and this is one of those situations where we kind of really didn't have the technical expertise to kind of fix anything before we kind of dug into it. But for everybody who did call in, we do want to say that we appreciate it. We love you guys when you call in. You guys always add so much flavor to the show, so thank you. And once again, if you do want to call in, though, the number is 609-910-0687. So this week, it's really ironic that Avi isn't here, because the first thing I want to start off with is something that Avi has actually talked about over the past couple of weeks. Actually, I take that back. It's been the past 2 years Avi has been calling for this. If you guys didn't see earlier today, there was a major breaking news. The Cincinnati Bengals head coach, Marvin Lewis, has decided that he is stepping down and he is going to leave the Bengals after this year. Marvin Lewis has been the Bengals head coach since 2002. He's brought them to 7 playoff appearances. The problem with Marvin Lewis is that he's not won one single playoff appearance. He's 0-7 in the playoffs after 15 years of being the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals, and he amassed a record of 123, 112, and 3 overall, which for a head coach is not bad. He's taken some decent Bengals teams to the playoffs. The problem is that he's never been able to get them over the hump. And there's been a lot of different, situations where a lot of people have made, made excuses for Marvin Lewis. Hey, it wasn't his coaching. He had, injuries to deal with, or, volatile people on the roster like Chad Ochocinco. He's had, Andy Dalton, who maybe hasn't been the stalwart quarterback that Cincinnati has really thought he was going to be over his career. We can really see it this year where the Bengals are completely out of playoff contention right now. And, I kind of feel like this is a formality. Marvin Lewis was going to be fired. There's almost no doubt in my mind that Marvin Lewis was not going to have a head coaching job in Cincinnati at the end of this year, regardless of of whether he wanted to step down or not. So I feel like this is a bit of a preemptive strike. Marvin Lewis is a good coach. Don't get me wrong, he is. But, the idea about being a head coach in the NFL is to win. And if you are going to bring your team to the playoffs, that's great. But you need to be victorious in the playoffs. And we've seen that Marvin Lewis hasn't been able to prove that. An 0-7 record really shows that Marvin Lewis can get you to a certain spot, but can't get you over that hump. Now, maybe it is the talent. Maybe it has been some of the injuries in those playoff games have actually really hindered the Bengals. There was a year where Andy Dalton was out and A.J. McCarron had to quarterback the team. There was years where some of their top flight wide receivers or their running backs were out. We've seen that in the past couple of years. Jeremy Hill, Giovanni Bernard have been alternating in the backfield. And it seems like every time they reach the playoffs, one of those guys isn't at anywhere near 100%. Now with Joe Mixon mixed into this whole situation, you get to a point where you see all these guys are coming in and they're doing everything that they need to do. They're making the right plays, but maybe the offense works one week and the defense doesn't work the next. And Marvin Lewis really has to be the guy who orchestrates this whole thing and puts it all together. What we're seeing now is that Marvin Lewis, in a very disappointing 0-7 playoff appearance record, shows that he's not the coach, at least for Cincinnati. There's a lot of speculation of where Marvin Lewis can go after this. We can see Marvin Lewis maybe pick up a job as, an analyst for maybe like Fox or ESPN. He's got the experience and he's a very personable person. You can see him during his interviews post game where he's really pretty personable, plays well against the media, probably would play well against some of the other hosts of those shows. On top of that, there are a lot of head coaching jobs that may open up at the end of the season. Most notably, there's going to be one in New York. I don't know how Giants fans feel about Marvin Lewis. I don't think he's a terrible coach. Don't get me wrong. I don't think he's the greatest in the world, but I don't think he's terrible. And I think maybe he could be a decent fit for a team like the Giants. But Avi actually had brought up a point to me during the week while we were talking, and he had said that he thinks that the Giants, if they're going to draft a quarterback, should really bring in a coach who is quarterback friendly. And Marvin Lewis hasn't really done that. And with AJ Green, I'm thinking of the wide receiver. He hasn't done that with Andy Dalton the entire time that Andy Dalton's been there. We haven't seen a lot of improvement from Andy Dalton. He's been a mediocre quarterback for the entire time that he's been in the system. Andy Dalton has always been a mid-range or an upper mid-range sort of guy. So if you guys have any opinions on Marvin Lewis, you want to see where he's going to go, any opinion on who the Giants coach should be, the phone lines are open. Give us a call. But it's pretty much where I stand when it comes to Marvin Lewis. Of course, Monday Night Football is on tonight. Huge game, huge playoff implications. The Atlanta Falcons and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Obviously, the Bucs are out of the playoffs right now, but the Falcons are hanging on to a proverbial string. They're in the last playoff spot right now in the NFC. I know that Avi had told me a little bit before going on the air. I'm going to kind of speak through myself for Avi because there's a couple of things he did want to say if he didn't get a chance to get on with us tonight. He talked about the fact that the Cowboys need the Falcons to actually lose this game right now. And here we are. It's the beginning of the second quarter. They're tied at 7. But the Falcons are driving. So Matt Ryan's trying to get them in a position to get them into maybe getting up ahead in this game. But Avi told me that he really obviously he wants his Cowboys to win. But the NFC playoff picture is really convoluted. Way more convoluted than the AFC playoff picture. This past week, there's been a couple of big teams that clinched. We'll start off with the NFC. The Philadelphia Eagles clinched the division and their playoff slot. They're 12-2. They beat a really, really beat down Giants team, and they didn't do too bad. Nick Foles played a pretty good game. The Giants put up a valuable fight. Eli Manning actually played well. But, and at the end of the day, we kind of always knew, the Eagles were just a better team than the Giants were. Maybe Nick Foles, his veteran influences can take over. It looks like they're starting to involve Jay Ajayi and LeGarrette Blount in the running game a little bit more. These are situations where, as a head coach, you have to make a lot of alterations. You lose Carson Wentz, an MVP candidate quarterback, and you bring in a guy like Nick Foles. And this is where I think, and me and Avi may have touched on this last week, this is one of those situations for me where I believe this is one of those big things where you need a backup quarterback who is capable in this league. Now, we're looking at the playoff slots right now. The Eagles are at top. They're 12-2. The number 2 team is the Minnesota Vikings, and there's another team where they had a backup quarterback who is capable that has taken them to an 11-3 record. Sam Bradford started the season as the quarterback for the Vikings, got hurt, went down early. Case Keenum came in, took over, and people aren't talking about Case Keenum enough, and I believe that he's a guy who actually deserves to be in the running at least for an MVP, vote at the very least in the conversation for a backup quarterback to take a team to an 11-3 record, clinching a playoff slot, may get home field advantage. These are huge numbers for a guy like Case Keenum, who's been really a career backup. So he's been doing an incredible job here. If you guys aren't watching, the Atlanta Falcons just scored. There you go. Looks like they ran it in. I can't tell if that was Coleman or no, it was Devonta Freeman who ran it in. So the Falcons are up. So Avi's probably in Miami somewhere cursing up a storm. And then the rest of the playoff picture that we get through. The Rams are 10-4. The Saints are 10-4. The Panthers are 10-4. And then we have 4 teams that are really close to an identical record. The Falcons are 8-5. Their future lies in this game. If they win, they are a full game above 3 other 8-6 teams in the NFC playoff picture. The Detroit Lions, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Dallas Cowboys. This is crunch time. These are big games that these teams need to get a win every week in order to stay viable, to stay relevant, to stay in the playoff picture. The Seahawks haven't been doing it. The Cowboys have had a good couple of weeks, the past few weeks. The Lions, they seem to just keep hanging on by a thread, and it was unfortunate. I mean, in theory, even after their loss, the Packers are still technically in the running, but Aaron Rodgers couldn't come back and couldn't work his magic to get the Packers within into the playoffs. So that's the NFC playoff picture right now. Avi and I, we ran down a couple of weeks ago what our picks were. It looks like for right now, these were the teams that I actually predicted to be in the playoffs. I believe that Avi had the Seahawks in place of the Falcons. Looks like the Falcons, as of right now, at the very least, are on their way. Of course, it's still very early in this game, but they could be on their way to being a 9-5 team, which really puts them in a much better position right now to keep that slot right now at the end of the NFC playoff picture. The AFC playoff picture is a little bit less convoluted. The 11-3 Patriots, after a very, very controversial week this week, a very controversial win, they are now 11-3. They clinched their division, and they've obviously clinched a playoff spot. They beat the Steelers this week, who are also 11-3, and they also clinched their division, and they're also locked into the playoffs. The Jacksonville Jaguars follow them at 10-4, and then this is where it gets a little bit convoluted in the AFC playoff picture. The Chiefs, the Titans, the Bills, who are hanging on currently to the last 3 slots in the AFC playoff picture, are all 8-6. The Baltimore Ravens, who have probably the most favorable schedule out of everybody, over the next couple of weeks, are 8-6 as well. So the Bills need to win out to keep into the playoff picture. The Ravens need to win out to stay in the playoff picture. And we have a phone call. Let's hope that we actually get it working this week. So we'll see as this loads up. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's Avi from Miami Beach, Florida.
Oh my God, Avi Schiffman. What's going on, buddy? How you doing?
Hey, how you doing, Albert? I'm great.
Dude, I'm trying to fly this plane solo, and it's not really. I think it's going okay, but
Albert, you're doing great, man. You're doing great.
Thanks, buddy. Thank you.
I miss you, though. I miss you.
Yeah, I miss you being in the studio here, man. It's not right looking over and trying to throw this to you and not having anybody to throw it to.
Man, you're doing great. I didn't like seeing the Falcons just score a touchdown now, but you know what? Maybe this will be a shootout.
It could be. I mean, you're also talking about having a shootout with Ryan Fitzpatrick I'm sorry. That's right. Fitzpatrick isn't playing anymore. With Jameis Winston as a quarterback. So we'll see. I mean, there's a chance, right?
There's a chance. That's right. And if Julio Jones doesn't do anything, it's me and you, baby, in the finals.
Oh, that's right. For everybody who's listening, Avi and I, as of right now, I've clinched my slot into the finals of our fantasy football league. If Julio Jones doesn't have a miraculous 40-point game in our league, Avi and I will actually be in the finals of our fantasy football league, which is kind of awesome.
Yeah.
It's a shame that it's a shame we're off for the next 2 Mondays. So everybody's gonna have to really kind of live in suspense. Christmas and New Year's. Everybody's gonna have to wait until after the holidays to find out which one of us came out the victorious. That's
right, and we're also gonna know playoff slots. We're gonna know more about the playoffs.
Right. Well, before we dig into the playoffs, I really got to get your take on Marvin Lewis bowing out, because I know how much you push for Marvin Lewis to be out of the Bengals coaching job.
Well, I heard today, I don't know if it's true, that a reporter asked him, like, yeah, I want to coach anywhere. She said, like, oh, it's Cincinnati too? Yeah, he's like, yeah, maybe. Is this true that he's not, like, officially done with them? I don't think so. But no, I mean, he
said himself he was stepping down from the position. Maybe he was just doing it to be political. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's about time, Albert. It's about time.
I know.
I know. Next is Eli. Next is Eli saying that I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, there's that chance.
Gotta give him respect. He played well. He played well yesterday, but you know what? Still time.
Right, and now that was a big win for the Eagles. I know that you're really hoping that the Bucs can kind of pull this game out, so the Cowboys have a little bit more of a chance. Last week, the Cowboys beat the Raiders in what was really a pretty close game. I got to ask you, what did you think of that paper measure for the first down? What was that all about?
Well, first of all, it seems like this guy is involved with every weird thing. Gene Steratore.
Yeah, Gene Steratore. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
I like him. I like him a lot. With the Dez catch, that was a catch, but this one was just it was ridiculous. First of all, you got that happening. You got what happened in the Steelers game. A lot of weird things. You got Thomas Davis, the most classy guy probably. He was the NFL Man of the Year, I think. Last 2 years ago?
Yeah.
With a dirty hit on Devontae Adams.
Yeah, I can't believe that.
And then you got the Jacksonville Jaguars making the playoffs. Blake Bortles did it.
I can't believe it, man. The 10-4 Jacksonville Jaguars clinching a playoff slot. I mean, this is crazy. And think about it this way: if the Patriots and the Steelers wind up, slipping a little bit, we can see the Jaguars with home field advantage.
I know.
How crazy is that?
What a finish to that game, huh?
Unbelievable, man. Absolutely unbelievable.
Talking about change the rules, man.
Look, there was a lot of hot finishes this week. The Cowboys over the Raiders. I'm gonna dig into a little bit on that call, the Patriots Steelers call. What did you think about that? That Jesse James, quote unquote touchdown that got taken off the board.
Listen, it was a touchdown. I'm sick of the rule.
Thank
I know
you.
It's the rule. It's a dumb rule. We all know it. Des Bryant's touchdown was a touchdown. This was a touchdown. It's the same thing. The ball crossed the line. It doesn't matter. If the ball crosses the line and you have possession, it's a touchdown. That's what it should be. That's
the way I always felt. If the ball breaks the plane, and that's the thing. Okay, so do you remember? I want to say that this was last week or the week before. There was a big play with the running back for the Carolina Panthers, Jonathan Stewart. He reached over the pile, and he put the ball over the goal line. Then he lost control of the ball after that, but they still called it a touchdown. Now, how is it that Jesse James breaks the plane with complete control, the ball hits the ground, and all of a sudden he loses it, and it's not a catch anymore?
It should be a catch, a fumble, and a touchdown. That's what happened with Des Bryant. The same thing. I said it should have been a fumble and a recovery, at least.
Right. Now, I mean, and I also know that this is. No, I agree. Another rule they need to change, and I know this benefited you a lot this week, but the Derek Carr play at the very end where he dove for the pylon and fumbled the ball.
Was a fumble. Well, that was.
It was.
That was.
But how? I just don't understand the idea that if you can fumble a ball anywhere in play other than at the goal line, you still get the ball back. In this case, when it's in the end zone, all of a sudden, if you fumble, the ball gets turned over. I don't know where this rule started. I feel like this is the first year. It's happened like 3 times this year. And I feel like, I don't know where this started, but out of nowhere, all of a sudden, this has become like a normal rule. I kind of think it's stupid. I know it played well to you, to your team this week. It played bad to my team a couple weeks ago against the Patriots. But I mean, what's your opinion on that rule?
I don't like the rule. Listen, the NFL, it's just stupid. What goes on in the NFL now? The referees can't make any decisions by themselves. You got to change something. This is football. They were saying yesterday, in high school it's a touchdown. In college, that's a touchdown. In the NFL, it's not. How does that make any sense?
It doesn't. It makes 0 sense.
You got to do something about it because it's look at what's going on. This could be the difference between the Patriots and the Steelers. The Patriots making the Super Bowl, the Steelers making the Super Bowl, and not making the Super Bowl. Really gives them home field advantage. It really does make a difference.
Absolutely. And I mean, the Steelers played well. What did you think about that call, that fake spike at the end of the game? I thought that was kind of a gutsy call.
I mean, everybody knew that it was coming. Clearly, well, you saw that everybody was. I mean, the whole left side of all the receivers on the left side just stood there. But that I didn't like the call. But they've done that before, the Steelers, and they've been successful at it.
Right, but I mean, you're playing the Patriots. I mean, kick the field goal, tie the game.
Yeah, you can't risk that. You can't risk that because the ball being tipped. You can't risk that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what they were thinking. I know that I'm sorry, I'm like drawing a blank. The Steelers are always a team that kind of are gutsy. They do these things. Yeah. They go for the 2-point conversions after all their touchdowns and all that stuff. But I don't know. That call was just. I mean, that was just a really weird call.
Right, and I said that it's the Steelers. I've been saying the Steelers' only chance to make the Super Bowl this year if they have home field advantage. I still believe it. And now that Antonio Brown's, I don't know, he can probably be back. But listen.
Well, they said his regular season's over.
Right.
So
it's
going
to be tough. I think that the Patriots have the path. They have the Bills next week, and then
and then the Jets.
They're gonna get home field, and then the Jets. Yeah. So
they have a very easy schedule.
Give them 2 wins. They're gonna have home field advantage again. And listen, they're going to win. They're going to easily win their first game. And then, listen, they're going to play Pittsburgh. If something else happens, maybe Jacksonville. Who knows? Or Kansas City. But,
Right.
Listen, I think it's another easy road to the Super Bowl for the Patriots.
I mean, you're not wrong. What do you think about the Titans still hanging on to a playoff slot right now?
Oh, my God.
Is that not crazy?
I told you they were going to lose.
Jimmy Garoppolo, 3-0 in San
Looking
Francisco.
good.
He's looking good.
I know. I'll tell you this. I'll tell you now, I don't know about Tennessee, but Buffalo is not making the playoffs this year. I still think the Chargers have a shot. I think they're going to jump them. I was wrong on that. They got smoked by the Kansas City. Kansas City's starting to look like Kansas City again.
I told you last week, buddy.
You're right. You were right. But Buffalo is going to New England and then Miami. They're gonna first of all this week they're gonna drop out of the playoffs. They're gonna lose to New England and then
right.
Baltimore.
Baltimore. Yep. And Baltimore has an easy schedule.
Buffalo is not making the playoffs this year.
No, I don't think so either. I know they barely beat the Dolphins this week. They don't look good.
So maybe it's Tennessee, maybe it's Chargers and Baltimore in the playoffs. And Tennessee and Buffalo dropping out, but you
it very well could be.
Yeah, but I just want to call in. You're doing a great job.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate you calling in.
Yeah, and last thing I want to say is, how about them Cowboys?
How about them Cowboys?
All right, bud.
All right,
I'll see you.
Yeah, I'll see you later, buddy. Obviously, we'll talk before before our next show because we're not going to be here for a couple of weeks. But I'll talk to you anyway. But on the air, I want to wish you happy holidays, happy New Year, and we're going to get right back on the horse as soon as we can.
You too as well, buddy. And let's go Buccaneers too.
Let's go Tampa. Let's get those Cowboys into the playoffs for you, Avi.
All right, man.
All right, I'll talk to you soon. All right.
Take care.
Bye.
Good night.
Well, there you have it. If he couldn't co-host the show with me, at least he called in and helped me out. Avi brought up a lot of really good points. The playoff picture is really convoluted right now, and we have really one of the most controversial calls in football right now was that Patriots-Steelers ending. For those of you guys who really didn't see it and really didn't kind of know what Avi and I were really trying to dig into, I didn't want to really – I know Avi's in Florida. Let's let him enjoy himself. So I figured, I'll go into it a little bit more now. So here we are at the goal line. Ben Roethlisberger gets a snap, throws the ball to his tight end, Jesse James, who completes a catch, stretches the ball over the goal line. The ball is officially over the goal line before his knee hits the ground. And as he's coming to the ground, the ball comes out of his grip, rolls around a little bit, hits the floor. He gets possession back. Now, the old rule seemed to always be if you break the plane, it's a touchdown. Now, all of a sudden, the rule is you have to break the plane and complete the catch. That was never a rule. And this is the thing that Avi brings up all the time, the Dez Bryant catch. It was Dez Bryant. It was Calvin Johnson. These guys, made big catches in big spots in huge games, didn't complete the catch all the way down, even though they had control of the football. The ball had broken the plane, and they were in bounds. And then all of a sudden, these calls are being overturned. A couple of weeks ago, you probably remember me screaming about the Austin Seferian-Jenkins catch that happened where it was against the Patriots again, where the Seferian-Jenkins caught the ball, juggled it a little bit, got it back into his chest, dove over the pylon, inbounds, and then fell out of bounds. And they called the ball. Not only was it not a catch, not a touchdown, which it was called on the field and overturned, but it was a fumble out of the end zone, which leads to a touchback, and it's a turnover. There is no other place from the 50-yard line going back to each goal line that if you fumble a ball and you will recover it or it goes out of bounds, that you lose possession of the football. At this point, there is no reason that this should still be a rule. You're costing people, these teams who maybe are starting drives at at their own 1-yard line, getting all the way to the end zone, and you're telling me that if they fumble in one spot on the field, that that ball gets taken away and given to the other team? That rule is absolutely atrocious. And it's slowing down the game. And it really is. Now, look, I'm the kind of a guy who over the past couple of weeks have talked really bad about the Patriots. Everybody knows that I'm a Jets fan. Everybody knows I'm not a Patriots fan. Everybody knows they're my most hated sports team in the history of sports. But, I mean, these calls are being made positively for the Patriots, but they're not being made for the Patriots' benefit. In theory, I guess they are the right team. They are the right calls. And it's a little bit rough to admit that because, it just always seems like every call goes the way of Tom Brady. Every call goes the way of the New England Patriots. Bill Belichick gets every call that he wants. Flags get thrown, and it's always in a positive for the New England Patriots. But you have to understand, these referees are doing their job. They're not in the pockets of the New England Patriots. Do calls usually benefit bigger teams? Absolutely. Teams like the Patriots in football, the Yankees in baseball, and I'm a big Yankee fan, and I'm well enough of a man to admit it, but the Yankees in baseball, the Lakers in basketball, any of the big Canadian teams in hockey, they're going to get more calls because they are more of an established, dominant team than anybody else. It's the same thing as when Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Brett Favre, these elite named quarterbacks, anytime they got hit, it was almost guaranteed that a flag was going to be thrown, and in some way it was roughing the passer, illegal hands to the face, an illegal hit on the quarterback, because they're elite quarterbacks. And nobody wants to see these elite quarterbacks go down, just like people don't want to see the elite teams, get overly penalized. Because this either goes one of two ways. The Patriots are either going to be a team where they're going to be penalized more than any other football team in the NFL, or they're going to get every call. And we're in a position right now where it just seems like they get every call. It just so happens that two of these big controversial calls came in the end zone of a ridiculously close game with a lot of implications at the end of it, and they both swayed in a positive way for the New England Patriots. The first one with Austin Seferian-Jenkins, I mean, as a Jets fan, it's heartbreaking. This team is now in the gutter. Bryce Petty came in, didn't play well. I think it's safe to say the Jets are going to need a quarterback next year, but they were in the thick of it at that point. No one expected Josh McCown to play well. No one knew who Robbie Anderson was. Nobody thought Austin Seferian-Jenkins was going to be a top-flight tight end like he was looking in the beginning of the season. They looked at the Jets' running attack, and they saw Matt Forte and Bilal Powell and some guy named Elijah McGuire, who nobody's heard of before this season. And everybody thought, well, the Jets are going to be 0-16. But here they are, in a position to win a game against their division rivals. And on the biggest play of the game, the Jets are called, the play is called a touchdown. And everybody in the entire place is going nuts. All the people on the sidelines are going crazy. Jets fans at home are jumping up and down. And I know for a fact that was the case because I was jumping up and down. It looks like the Jets are going to beat the Patriots, and this call gets overturned. It's heartbreaking for a Jets fan, but it's also heartbreaking for a football fan. Because what we're doing now is we're taking up the ball out of the hands of a team who drove all the way up the field, made positive plays the entire way to get to the end zone, to score. And we're not only just wiping that touchdown off the board, we're taking the ball out of their hands and giving it to the opposite team. That killed every ounce of momentum for the New York Jets that week. This call against the Steelers this week took every ounce of momentum out of the Steelers' offense. When you have these calls are made, even I know it benefited obvious Cowboys, the Derek Carr fumble in the end zone. This is the end of the game. There's a couple of seconds left in this game, and now we're taking the ball out of that team's hands. This is one of the worst rules in the history of the NFL. The NFL goes back every year, and they try to build upon things that people complain about every year. And we get to a point now where this has got to be at the top of the list. This rule has to be changed. It doesn't make any sense. There's no reason why a fumble on any other point on the field is not a turnover, but it is in the end zone. Doesn't make sense. It's an awful rule. And in my opinion, the Steelers got screwed this week. And everybody knows I'm not a Steelers fan. I don't like the Steelers. I don't like the Patriots. As a matter of fact, if both of those teams could have lost this week, I would have actually been happy. Not that that's physically possible, but I want to see the Jaguars get a number one slot because, hey, they got a young quarterback and a young team, and they're hungry, and it's new. It's exciting. It's not something that we've seen, for the past 10 years where if you're looking at the AFC, the quarterbacks that make the playoffs were Peyton Manning or Tom Brady or Ben Roethlisberger, and that one year where it was Joe Flacco. So I want to see something a little bit different. That that's just my opinion. But you can't keep putting positive plays into the hands of these bigger teams. I think it's time where we need to reevaluate the rule book, reevaluate the scheduling, and reevaluate where some of these teams are as it's structured in the NFL. We always want to see something a little bit different. Nobody wants to see the Patriots versus, some team, whether it was the Falcons or maybe it's the Panthers. A couple years ago, the Saints were in the thick of it. The 49ers, the Seahawks. It just seems like it's the same 10 or 15 teams every year who are in the playoffs, make it to the second round, make the finals, and are in the Super Bowl. Me personally, I'm tired of it. I want to see a team like the Jaguars. Everybody knows I'm a huge Chiefs fan. I want to see a team like the Chiefs make it. I have been so impressed with the LA Rams this year and what they've been able to do with a solid defense, a second-year quarterback, wide receivers that nobody knew their names before the beginning of the season. Nobody knew who Robert Woods was or Cooper Kupp was, and they're becoming household names now because the Rams are 10-4, and they did it from the way that every team's supposed to do it. They built from the bottom. They paid their dues. They were knocked down so many years in a row, and now they're rising to being one of the more elite teams in the NFL. Sure, the Vikings have made the playoffs for the past couple of years, but the Minnesota Vikings are in a position now where they're 11-3 with a backup quarterback when their top running back left their team this year to go somewhere else, and now all of a sudden they're playing better than they ever have before. Guys, these are the teams that I want to see make the playoffs. I want to see the Super Bowl where it's the Jaguars versus the Rams. Because maybe it's not the highest rated Super Bowl. Maybe it's not going to be the one that the advertisers are going to be going crazy and saying, yeah, no, that's what we want to do. We want to pour millions of dollars into a Jaguars-Rams Super Bowl. I get it. It's not pretty. But man, would that be a fun game to watch? These are there are some teams that are just this year are electric. They're so much fun to sit back and watch. And it's not fun anymore to watch teams be automatic like the Patriots, like the Steelers. Even to a point where, the Panthers and the Falcons, maybe they've fallen. But there are points where they're playing these games, and it's automatic. It's bam, Matt Ryan touchdown. Bam, Cam Newton touchdown. These are just the most elite teams in football. Let's get a little bit of a change. Let's hope for a little bit of change. Let's hope that over the next 10 years, we don't see the same two teams in the Super Bowl. Now, I'm not a big Eagles fan. And yeah, I know. Carson Wentz goes down. They lose their MVP quarterback. They lose their basically their best player on their team. But they're a 12-2 team. Nick Foles is capable. And I would love to see Nick Foles and the Eagles make it to the Super Bowl. Why not? The Eagles have never won a Super Bowl in franchise history. I'm not rooting for them. I don't care whether or not they win. But let's get them there to give them the opportunity. Why not? If the Eagles can make it, it's a different feel to a Super Bowl than it has been for the past 10 or 15 years. Now, one of the big things that we're looking at right now is if you look at some of the top-ranked teams, the names of these quarterbacks aren't household names anymore. And to me, we're starting to show that maybe the era of Tom Brady and Ben Roethlisberger and Drew Brees, Cam Newton, Matt Ryan, maybe those days are over. Because now we look down in the playoffs, and here are the names of some of the quarterbacks. Case Keenum, Jared Goff, Tyrod Taylor, Marcus Mariota, Alex Smith, Blake Bortles. These are names that nobody would have predicted a couple of years ago would have been anywhere near the playoff picture. And now here we are. We have 2 weeks left of this season, and most of those guys are going to bring their team to a playoff slot. This is a huge change in the NFL this year. It's always the same guys. We always hear about Aaron Rodgers. And before he went out and got hurt last year, you heard about Tony Romo and Russell Wilson and Matt Stafford, guys like Joe Flacco, and even to a point, you can even say, even though they don't really make the playoffs consistently, Phillip Rivers too. These are the elite quarterbacks in the NFL. This is who we usually see make a playoff run every year. Eli Manning is another name. And we don't have that this year. So there's a lot of differentiation in the NFL this year. And we've seen that there are some teams who can build themselves up from the ground level and rival some of these top teams. Patriots and the Steelers need to be dropped down a peg. It's simple. We've seen it in the NFC. Most of the elite powerhouse teams of the past couple of years aren't even in the playoffs. The Packers aren't in the playoffs. The Seahawks aren't in the playoffs. The Cowboys aren't in the playoffs. Usually the Lions are in the playoff mix. They're not in the playoffs as of right now. The NFL is going to go through a transition period. The Patriots aren't going to be a dominant team for the next 10 years. As much as Tom Brady says he can play for another 10 years, I don't see it happening. This should be, and more than likely will be, the last year we see Ben Roethlisberger as the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. This could be a year where he goes out on top like Peyton Manning did a couple years ago. And then we look around at the other teams, and we're seeing fresh faces. We're seeing new uniforms donning the field when it comes to playoff time. This is where the NFL needs to go. Because a lot of people have been complaining about the repetitiveness of the Super Bowls every year. And I'm one of them. So I think we're in for a really positive NFL over the next couple of years. So moving on to another topic, I'm going to go over a couple of the bigger games of this week. So as of right now, if you guys aren't watching, the Falcons are up 17-7 on the Bucks. They just kicked a field goal. It's definitely not making Avi happy in Florida right now, but it looks like the Falcons are driving to a point where they might be in control of their own destiny and could really latch onto that last slot in the playoffs. So some of the big games this week that had a lot of big playoff implications. The Cowboys beat the Raiders 20-17. That was the NFL afternoon game. I'm sorry, it was the night game. I was impressed with the Cowboys this week. I think Dak Prescott played well. I think that Rod Smith is doing an admirable job in trying to fill in for Ezekiel Elliott. It's not easy. Zeke is he's allowed to come back, I believe, at week 16. That's where his suspension is ended. So if the Cowboys can keep rolling until they get their top flight running back off a suspension, the Cowboys always do have a chance to make it. But this is a big game for these teams. The Raiders were came into this game at 6-7. If they would have won, they could have been 7-7. Would have been right up there with the Chargers, and the Chiefs were 8-6. This is a big game for the Raiders, and once again, the Raiders blew it. Derek Carr didn't play well. Their defense didn't play well. Marshawn Lynch has almost been a non-factor in almost every game since he's come back to football. And the Oakland Raiders are just not the team we expected. We expect them to be a playoff-bound team. They're nowhere near that. And the Cowboys seem to keep rolling. And like Avi said, how about them Cowboys? The 49ers beat the Titans this week. We had Jimmy Garoppolo, who is, looking like Tom Brady Jr. right now. He studied under Tom Brady for so many years. He comes onto a really bad 49ers team. The guy has nobody to throw to. He has Carlos Hyde, who barely had a running game this week, and Matt Breida, who doesn't seem to be fitting into the offensive scheme over there in San Francisco anymore. But Jimmy Garoppolo finds a way to win. They win by a field goal over the Titans as time expires. And this is one of those things where, maybe the 49ers become a good team next year. Avi's friend Ari, who seems to call in usually every week, had said a couple of weeks ago that when Jimmy Garoppolo took over, that, this looks like it could be a start of something really good. Looks like we might be right. Jimmy Garoppolo looks like he's really proving himself in San Francisco. The Rams beating up on the Seahawks. Man, what is going on with the Seattle Seahawks this year? I know that their offensive line is terrible. I know that we're to a point now where we're seeing a team being run by one player. It's Russell Wilson versus the world. And the Rams beat up on the Seahawks this week. This wasn't even, it was almost like there was like a mercy rule should have been in effect in this game. Jared Goff had another monster game. He's making household names out of these wide receivers that nobody knew about. And here's Doug Baldwin and Russell Wilson, two guys from the past 2 years who everybody talked about as being two of the most elite players in football, and they can't seem to even get on the same page in the same game to make any impact at all. The Seahawks don't have a running game. They don't have. They really don't have an offensive scheme at all, and I'm really surprised at them being 8-6 right now because they were one of the teams that everybody had predicted to be in the Super Bowl this year. There's going to be a lot of evaluation that goes on now, and I get it. They're missing a lot of their big pieces on defense. They've been marred by injuries this year, but a lot of teams have been marred by injuries, and they've still been doing well. Injuries at their top flight positions. The Eagles have lost their quarterback. The Vikings lost their quarterback. A lot of teams this year. Tyrod Taylor didn't play for 2 games. A lot of teams are losing their biggest pieces, and they're still finding a way to win. For the past couple of weeks, the Seahawks haven't been one of them. It's going to be a long offseason for that team. And I don't know if the Seahawks don't make the playoffs this year, that Pete Carroll's job is not in jeopardy. As a Jets fan, we're kind of preconceived to look at Pete Carroll in a certain sort of way because of the all the negativity he brought to our team. If I'm the Seahawks right now, I might be looking for a new head coach. In a game that no one expected to not be a blowout, the Jacksonville Jaguars beat up on the Texans. And I can't get mad. Look, Deshaun Watson got hurt. The Texans are using Tom Savage as their quarterback. We know he's not supposed to be there. We know he's not the person that everybody, that was going to be intriguing to play. The Texans just are looking for a mercy killing. Their season's over. And the Jaguars are 10-4 and the most surprising team in the NFL right now. I'm to a point where I believe that if I'm any team in the playoffs right now, I do not want to play the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Bills beat the Dolphins this week. The Bills moved to 8-6. The Dolphins dropped to 6-8. The Dolphins are pretty much almost mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. I don't think anybody really expected the Dolphins to do really well with Jay Cutler as their quarterback, but they put up a pretty good fight. The Bills are rolling, but like Avi said, they have a tough schedule. They're going to play the Patriots. That's almost a guaranteed loss for them. They're playing in New England, one of the hardest places to win. And they have to beat Tom Brady in New England. Almost impossible. Not many people do it. So if this is a big win this week for the Bills. After that snow game last week where they came off, looking like one of the biggest victories in their franchise history, the Bills are keeping themselves afloat. They're keeping themselves in the last position of the playoffs. It seems to me like the Bills are actually doing pretty well. But they're going to run into a buzzsaw. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I think it's either going to be the Ravens or the Chargers, like Avi said. And more I'm thinking that I believe in the Ravens that they're actually going to do it. The Saints beat the Jets 31-19. And man, I know every week I come out here and I talk about the Jets. I'm a Jets fan. That's what I'm going to do. I don't have anything to say anymore. This team has fallen apart. Josh McCown had a monster year, and he breaks his hand. And then Bryce Petty comes in, and he was supposed to be the starter for this team this year. This was supposed to be our guy, the future of our franchise. We were at least supposed to see this year if he was going to be that guy. We can tell right now, he's not ready. He's not good. He's got no pocket presence. He over and underthrows half of his passes. So I think we're to a point now where the New York Jets know that next year they need a viable quarterback. If the Jets don't get a quarterback, they're basically dead in the water because all the other pieces are pretty good. Yeah, okay, the Saints scored 31 points on the Jets. Fine. Some of that was, I believe there was a defensive touchdown in that game, so you can't blame the Jets defense on all of that. But you're going against the 10-4 Saints, one of the most elite offenses in football. Michael Thomas had a monster game. Drew Brees, again, has a monster game. Nobody seems to know how to stop Ingram or Kamara. And the Saints might roll all the way through, and they could be one of the teams that, could be an underdog right now. but could be a favorite by the end of the season to make the Super Bowl. The Saints proved that they belong where they do, and the Jets proved where they belong where they are, in the basement, once again. The Jets have the worst record in the AFC East again. They're going to have the worst record in the AFC East again. And if you're a Jets fan, you can just hope that next season's a little bit better. Because if not, it's just another season of torture. Moving on, the Panthers beat the Packers. Aaron Rodgers throws 3 interceptions. Cam Newton plays well. The Panthers move up. The Packers now are are pretty much out of the playoff picture. 7-7. They have to win out and have like half the other teams lose in order for them to make the playoffs. I think everybody thought that Aaron Rodgers was going to come back and have a monster game, but man, he had collarbone. He broke his collarbone. This isn't an easy injury to come back from. It's his throwing arm. The guy's a quarterback. The guy throws a football for a living, and he hurt the shoulder that he throws the football with. I don't know if anybody really expected Aaron Rodgers to come back and just create some new magic, but this is basically the game that I figured he was going to have. The Panthers are looking good. They're 10-4. It looks like they may have a playoff spot wrapped up, and they're getting hot at the right time. Their running game is clicking. Devin Funchess is becoming an elite wide receiver. Cam Newton's playing like the Cam Newton of old. It's big for the Panthers. They're catching at the right time. The Redskins beat the Cardinals 20-15. Not much to talk about in that game. Really no playoff implications. The Ravens beat the Browns 27-10. And it looks like the Browns are on to another season where they're not going to win a game. And it's a shame. And the Ravens just keeping themselves relevant. They are in the hunt. They're one spot out of being in the playoffs. And they have a good schedule coming up. And we can see the Ravens make the playoffs this year. And I think that they will over the Bills. And the Titans aren't playing well at all. I mean, we just talked about them losing to the 49ers. So this is one of those years where the Ravens might sneak their way back in. And they can be a dangerous team. They have a good defense. The Vikings beat the Bengals 34-7. I think the only enough substance to talk about this game is that Teddy Bridgewater actually came in and played a little bit. Other than that, the Vikings are rolling. And the Bengals are a mess. And this is why Marvin Lewis stepped down. The Eagles beat the Giants 34-29. I talked about this game a little bit earlier. Not really much else to go over. Nick Foles played well. He was efficient. He's looking good. And the Giants are a dumpster fire. And I don't think that Eli Manning should be their quarterback next year. That's on the Giants right now. Other than that, there's nothing positive to look forward to if you're a New York Giants fan except for next year. And don't worry, I'm a Jets fan. It's the same thing for me. The Chiefs won one of the biggest games of the week on Saturday when they beat the Chargers 30-13. This is one of those games where a lot of people thought that the Chargers were going to come back and they were going to put themselves into a playoff position. And the Chargers played well. But the Chiefs are turning it on. They're getting hot at the right time. They had a couple of bad weeks. But now we're in a position where we see the Chiefs doing really well. And they may be one of those teams that no one wants to play in the playoffs because if they're hot, they're almost too hot to stop. The Lions beat the Bears 20-10. Lions keep themselves in the hunt in the playoffs. But I got to say one thing about the Bears. I know I've come out and said this a couple of times over the past couple of weeks. I love Mitch Trubisky. Yeah, he didn't have a great game this week. But there was a point where he was on the sidelines, kneeled up in front of his entire offense. And he's barking orders to them. He's looking like a leader. And if I can sit back and look at a guy in his rookie year looking like a leader, then this guy is going to be good for the NFL. Most teams in the NFL don't have a good leader at the helm. They usually try to get their coaching to do that. The really good quarterbacks step up, and Mitch Trubisky is stepping up already. I like what I've seen out of this kid. I think he's going to be great. I think the Bears are going to have a good quarterback for years to come. Finally, the Broncos beat the Colts on Thursday Night Football. Again, nothing much to talk about in that game. The Colts season was over. Andrew Luck's career might be over. And, the Broncos, better luck next year. So, to wrap this up, the playoff picture is heating up. There's a lot of new teams in. There's a lot of old teams, out. The guard is changing. But the one thing that I want to know right now is what constitutes a touchdown in the NFL. If someone can give me the absolute definition of that, I would love that. And I really think that this is one of those things that needs to be brought up in the owners' meetings at the next NFL meeting. What's a catch in football anymore? Why does it seem like every week somebody's doing something different, and somebody's getting calls, somebody is getting a call and somebody isn't? I guess that at this point, the only thing we can do is wait and hope they actually start to fix it. Well, thank you guys for joining us this week. Thank you, Avi, for calling in. This has been the Opening Whistle Podcast. I'm Albert Albanese, and if you want to see anything else that we've done, including last week, Avi and I were a guest on the Dave Knows Wrestling live stream. You can go to facebook.com/the Slam Sessions Podcast Network and see everything related to all the stuff that I do, and you can see that great episode with Avi, Dave, and I. So thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Have a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, have a wonderful New Year, and we'll see you guys the first week we're here when the school's open. Thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
The Opening Whistle Radio Show on MetsonRadio.com. For more information, go to Facebook.com/the Slam Sessions Podcast Network. We'll see you next week.